Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I am Jackie Terraza. I'm the Carolyn Mussey Director of the Colby College Museum of Art. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Miles and Katharine Culbertson Prentice Distinguished Lecture featuring artist William Cordova. And just a few practical things. We're recording this talk, which will be available on YouTube after today. And please be sure to silence your cell phones. The talk and the Q&A will last for about an hour, and following the program, I invite you to join us in the Adams Gallery of the museum for a reception and continued conversation. These days, I am personally very appreciative for any opportunity to be in conversation and in community, and I hope that this evening offers you that as well. It is in keeping with the Colby Museum's mission to open access to art and artists and to create a forum for research, for experimentation, for dialogue, and for joyful connection. The Prentice Lecture was established in 2006 to bring to campus artists and art historians connected to our exhibitions, our collections, and our programs for the educational benefit of Colby students and faculty, staff as well, and the broader Maine and Central Maine community in particular. This year, we invited William Cordova to publicly kick off his year-long fellowship at the Lunder Institute for American Art. And in particular, he has an Osorio Foundation Fellowship named after the artist Alfonso Osorio. The Lunder Institute is the Colby Museum's incubator for research and artistic practice. And as a kind of think tank, it is also a platform and a convener for the field, offering a space to engage in meaningful conversations about American art, past, present, and future. I am grateful to the staff of the Lunder Institute, Erica and Caitlin in particular today, and Karen Platt as well. I'm also grateful to, on our team, especially to Christian Adame, who coordinated and orchestrated this talk. Thank you very much. And to everybody else from ITS and our colleagues at the museum who have helped promote the event, thank you for all you do. The Kirby Foundation established the support of this lecture series. I also thank the Alfonso Osorio Foundation for establishing this important annual fellowship that enables artists to stretch their practice in new ways. And my thanks also to the Lunder Foundation for its support of the Lunder Institute for American Art. This evening is an introduction to William and an invitation to engage during his fellowship. During his time at Colby, he will research and reflect on the historical narratives of graphic design and commercial media tools that artists and activists have used across the world to engage with and draw attention to socio-political issues. And he will be working with faculty and students and with a range of individuals that are, partners in this work as well. And who knows where your work will take you as you progress, because that is part of the point of the Lunder Institute. The work might take you somewhere else. William Cordova was born in Lima, Peru, and now lives in New York and in Miami. He studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and later at Yale University, where he received an MFA. Creative engagement in architecture, geometry, and history inspire his practice. And these are essential components in Cordova's life and work, which have inspired his worldview. His interdisciplinary work illuminates the synthesis of memory, of ritual, of mythology, to further disrupt, challenge, and reassess definitions of our collective landscape. He has participated in numerous residencies, such as those hosted by the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Core Museum of Fine Arts program in Houston, Project Row Houses, the American Academy in Berlin, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and others. And he has received awards and fellowships from the Knight Foundation, Art Matters, the Guggenheim Foundation, the Joan Mitchell Foundation, and Creative Capital. He is co-founder of the Bass Collective and CCC, which stands for Coffee Cup Collective. So please join me in welcoming William.
Thank you. Am I coming through? Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for that introduction. And it's really wonderful to be here. I'll try to be quick and make it painless. I want to thank Erica also, Caitlin and Karen for all your support, for inviting me. And a little nervous here. I don't have notes. I don't write anything, nor do I memorize anything. I guess I freestyle everything to a certain extent. And I did also go to Miami-Dade Community College first in Miami, and then transferred to Hillman College, and then went to the School of the Arts at Chicago and Yale University. Yeah, it took me 6 years to, I never graduated from Miami-Dade College. I was a terrible student and had to unlearn certain things and learn how to properly study. And then eventually transfer to the Art Institute. But yeah, it was a long road, but I don't regret any of it because the process for me was the most important part, and I learned not to waste any time thereafter. Everything became a lot more precious from that point on. My presentation will be focused on a lot of different things. I'll highlight certain things because I don't want to bombard you with so much that you're overwhelmed and leave early. But there's a beginning, a middle, and a now, and also the future. But I'll start with the middle, and then we'll go back to the beginning, just to contextualize my motivations and roots also. So I'm going to start out with a very short piece of a documentary I made with my peers from grad school. We had a collective, the Base Collective, and also the Coffee Cup Collective. It was a support group, but I won't elaborate. I'll just show it to you.
In the early 2000s, art and PhD students tended to think outside of the box, using a different set of logic. Their influences came from different sources that were not always part of any academic curriculum. They broadened the scope of possibilities. Artist Soul Sax foresaw many of these changes in the late 1990s when he stated, "Hip-hop was not embraced by institutions of higher learning until after the 2000s. We were in the trenches before that." Many students of color related to one another by building support groups, collectives, developing personal and professional relationships even after graduating from their programs. Some artists of color went on to participate in the Studio Museum in Harlem Artist in Residence program with the guidance of Lowry Stokes Sims, Thelma Golden, and Christine Kim. Other institutions like Rush Arts, directed by artist Derek Adams, and later Nico Whedon, were innovative in using commercial gallery strategies with nonprofit values to create ambitious and effective exhibitions, supporting hundreds of artists of color between 1999 and 2009.
My name is Shoshana Weinberger. I graduated from Yale in 2003 from the painting and printmaking department. You know, the thing about the first year at Yale was sort of my relationship with my professors. I think the relationship with trying to explore my identity through my work, which is what I applied to Yale with and what I wanted to continue to explore. And I had a handful of professors that I could have a dialogue with, but the majority of the professors were kind of the old guard. And my second year, you know, it was sort of the same old guard and feeling a little bit like I was on a lifeboat, kind of finding myself rowing ashore by meeting and connecting with more of my peers in the painting and printmaking department, but also in the sculpture department, in photography, graphic design, and even architecture. And so critiques were often steered by the old guard, and there were lots of favoritism. that seemed to be part of, I don't know, the typical patriarchy and that same sort of canon of art that we're all supposed to think about and read about and contemplate. And so I felt like I was looking to get out as soon as I could.
I often think of entering Yale as a moment when my generation departed the 90s with a completely new set of rules and logic. A generation collectively generating alternative ideas, challenging the status quo by pausing and debunking institutionalized aesthetic standards. I was thinking of a fourth wall that constantly oscillates and is defined by alternative logic based on a spiritual component, working through interdisciplinary means and a nonlinear narrative. In my work, I wanted to illuminate the synthesis of memory, ritual, and mythologies that have the capacity to disrupt, challenge, and reassess definitions of our collective landscape. I'm talking about hip-hop, Native American mathematics, sacred geometries. We were improvising on top of the rules and the rulers and being conceptualists as a state of being. There was much confusion and pushback in why we found common bonds and built support groups. We networked throughout the 2000s, and we built presence despite the lack of institutionalized hip-hop scholarship, despite the lack of academic interest in our own side of the mountain. While in grad school, I also lived inside a wooden box to save money. I kept a video journal that also felt it important to document my peers, their work, their presence, our contributions. We were in the trenches, and we knew we were building something different.
Create dangerously, stated author Edwidge Dandika. Indeed, create dangerously.
Okay, so that was the middle part of my story, my grad period, which involved students who came in afterwards that we networked into the program, and those who came before us supported us, and each took turns in supporting other students, and slowly cultivated this community of artists from the programs in the film, the photography, graphic design, sculpture, and painting departments. I was in the painting department, but I didn't paint, and I still don't know how to paint properly. I wanted to, but my point was that I was pushing further outside of that, and a lot of the points of references that we were coming into the program with, the school just didn't have that scholarship, that background, and so they weren't able to give us feedback. It was there, but at the same time, they didn't know how to access it. They saw the music reference, but they didn't see what reference contextualized the music. And so some of that I'll show here. I always start with a photograph of my mom and my older brother. Those are two of my biggest influences, just in life in general. And then I go into some things that influenced my childhood. All of this is part of my landscape, and it's coming in and out of my practice all the time. Coming in because I always revisit and I always reflect. And coming out is because it's always shaping itself without me dictating it. It's just part of my subconscious and consciousness. So Pancho Fierro before, Afro-Peruvian, watercolorist in the 1800s in Peru. Martin Adan was a poet who wrote a very short story when he was 18 years old, and it was later published, La Casa de Cartón, which I think is a perfect example of what Peru is. it's many things. There's many entry points into it. Of course, science fiction was my way of coping with a lot of violence growing up in the U.S., in Miami specifically. I channeled trauma into my work, try to deal with anxiety, things like that, through comic books and writing short stories. Martin Chambi was a photographer from Cusco who I saw everywhere in Peru as a child, the representation of his work, which is really important to see ourselves as examples, because it gives you a sense of being, of empowerment, too, of culture. Tupac Amaru, there's many Tupac Amarus, so take your pick. This was my first exposure to Tupac Amaru. And of course, later on, there's Tupac Amaru Shakur in the 90s, who I thought was Peruvian, and he is, still. Chilean hip-hop in the 80s. Hello. This is all material that informed me and shaped me. Bringing cameras into concerts, Force MCs, Run DMCs, a lot of MCs, Two Live Crew. These are all concerts that I saw in Miami growing up. My peers in school. Also, how music, the aesthetics, the graphics informed me. Of the past, like the Kinks, give people what they want. This is in 1981. If they get back to the late 60s, early 70s, Power to the People was the moniker. And then give people what they want. And he spray painted it. But then you have Stanley Clarke's 1976 School Days, which is this fusion of rock and jazz. And he spray painted. That was the first time that aerosol can was used or represented in an album cover in 1976. And then you have Lee Quiñones, who pioneered aerosol art in the early 70s, more specifically 74. And he made a vinyl record of his many adventures in the subway, just monologues, and made a vinyl LP. It's a lot more recent. And then you have all these commonalities of flags, and I was interested in the geometry of flags and cultural encoding, from dub music to punk rock to hip hop, 70s, 80s, and early 2000s. And then my own post-high school work before I even started studying art. Tupac again, Tupac Amaru, but also Tupac Shakur. And so you have a lot of points of references into my work, and this is a good example of it. This is a piece of Studio Museum in Harlem. When I was at Studio Museum in Harlem, right after I graduated, I decided to try and develop my practice by going to do art residencies and working collectively, as I had been in grad school, because we were able to achieve a lot more as individuals, but as also a collective. We have more support. And I started doing that when I was in undergrad, because students of color were a minority at the Art Institute of Chicago. So we banded together and did our own little shows. Little shows because it was a big city. And in between that time, I went back to Miami for 5 years, and I went to grad school. I found myself being in a similar situation in grad school. One of maybe two students of color in the painting department. There was only one in photography, one in sculpture. And there just wasn't this feedback from faculty. or my peers. And so these collectives transitioned out of school. We're still, I guess, navigating our lives and supporting one another in many different ways. And this included a lot of PhD students as well at Yale. And so I ended up at Student Museum in Harlem because I applied to all these residencies to see if I could extend my my studio practice and my focus. So I figured, let me try and, after 2 years, go directly to a residency and then to another residency and another one. So I ended up doing that for 10 years, just trying to survive, because I don't come from wealthy families, and I needed some way to do what I wanted to do, which was art, without slowing down, without losing my focus. And the reason it took me actually 6 years to transfer out of Miami-Dade College was because A, I didn't have enough money to take a lot of classes. B, I wasn't a good student. C, I just couldn't, I couldn't focus properly. And I was actually avoiding the arts. I thought, why pursue the arts? What can you do with it? You know, who's an artist? I knew nothing about contemporary art, anything. So one of the teachers in school, in my junior college, pulled me aside and explained to me that I was making assumptions about something I knew nothing about. And he was right. So I took one class, it changed my mind, and I dove into the arts. I was just scared. I thought that I should get a job or pursue something that makes money, even though it wouldn't make me happy. So as soon as I changed my major, my GPA changed from 0.95 to 3.9, and I was actually happy. I was happy doing what I wanted to do, and I figured I'll make ends meet somehow as long as I'm happy. And that's how I ended up going eventually to Chicago and then grad school. And in the process, working with a lot of different individuals and groups of people, just building a community. And residencies allowed me to also cultivate that, and still does. Even though I don't do residencies as much as anymore, before I did it to survive, that we all eventually need to arrive at a place where we can live, not just survive. Because it's hard to reflect on what you're doing if you're just on survival mode. My work is installation-based, and it's a reflection of a lot of the things that I just shared in the slides and also the video. I wouldn't define my entire practice as being influenced by hip-hop. But then I would, because hip-hop is influenced also by so many national, but also international historical events, individuals, philosophies, values, and cultures, and languages. This is one of the installations, more of my work that's more recent. It's a piece that I come back to a lot. It's a replica of a building that two activists were assassinated in Chicago in 1969, December 4th, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And this piece is titled The House that Frank Lloyd Wright Built for Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, y Atahualpa. Okay. And this was done in 2006 at the CORE program in Houston. And the curators at the Whitney Biennial were visiting, saw it, decided to include it in the, no, they saw it in 2007, included it in 2008. And it has a lot of different components. Yeah. Little things, some collaging in the background. some things inside of it as well. Those contextualize the work, otherwise just 2x4s. But it's a replica of the building where these two individuals were assassinated. I wanted to keep it and maintain it somewhat abstract because I didn't want to create a spectacle of their murders. And that's something that it's too easy to kind of embrace sometimes, to make spectacle, and you get a quick response, but then you're not honoring anyone when you do something like that. You're just devaluing them, and oftentimes taking out the content. And after that, I did more work, somewhat abstract, somewhat more representational, but it's always installation-based. I don't have the details of this piece here. This is titled Moby Dick, after Oscar Wilde, Oscar Romero, and Oscar Grant. And it's a police car turned into a mobile library. And the interior holds all these books that have been censored or excluded from certain institutions, or people who sought exile somewhere else outside of the U.S. And most of their names are written on the surface of the vehicle. And the interior, I usually don't share it. This is one part of it. So there's batteries in the vehicle's trunk. You can actually live inside. There's a coffee maker. There's electricity, a place to rest, and some personal items as well. The idea goes back to survival, to education, and living off the grid. This is Yawar Malku, Lando Landu, Royalty, Abduction, and Exile. And it's, here's some other parts of that piece. Yeah, this idea came from after watching The Empire Strikes Back when I was 11. I don't know how many people are familiar with that specific film, but got a witness over here. When I saw Lando Calrissian, played by Billy D. Williams, and his name is Lando, I thought he was Peruvian. I always think people are Peruvian because we're all connected one way or the other in this universe. But I make these literal connections also. Because his name was Lando. And Lando is also a sacred dance in Peru. And it comes from Angola, the Landu. And the Falcon was actually Lando's spaceship, we find out in The Empire Strikes Back. We thought it was Han Solo's in the first film. And in the first film, if anyone's seen it, Han Solo hides Luke Skywalker and the rest of the gang under the floorboards. He says, I never used this to smuggle people. So it's probably Lando who was smuggling people, kind of like Henry Box Brown smuggled himself out of slavery into freedom in a wooden crate. And so I made this falcon out of wood, but it's also in relation to the falcon, which is a sacred bird, as is the condor in South America. Yawar Malku is Blood of the Condor in Aymara. Yawar Malku is a film from Bolivia by Jorge Sanjines, made in 1969, the year I was born. So I was thinking about all these things. So this is basically how my internal constellation works, and putting them all together. If you only see the vessel, you're never going to arrive to that conclusion. It would be a flawed poem. But there's all these components that lead you to not necessarily a conclusion, but in that vicinity. And you can see the vessel from the second floor here. You can go underneath and see all these different components that slowly give you an idea of where I'm going with this. So a lot of the work is layered, heavily layered. One could say it's like a Rauschenberg with all these historical references. Heavily layered, especially in a time where him and Jesper Johns would have been arrested for being homosexuals in the 1950s. And so they had to layer a lot of things, mask them, camouflage. And some of this work is camouflaged as well. You could see this as a camouflage, but it's also a portrait. I'm not hiding my face, I'm more revealing it. But I'm revealing it in layers, not necessarily the layer of the newspaper that I'm holding up, or the representations of Geronimo and Poundmaker, or Huey Newton, or the Black Panther newspaper from 1969. But within that sculptural element of those historical points that I'm making. So again, it's a constellation that I'm trying to create here of historical points in time, because those three are in three different trajectories. And then you have the trees in the background, the vertical, and I'm also vertical. And this is also Native American land. This is at the MacDowell Artist Colony. And so it wasn't just me holding something up for kicks. It was very, very specific, very deliberate. And these are works that I do for myself. I don't exhibit them. This is one of a series. I had another one with Willie Colon, the album Sing Sing with Felipe Luciano, referencing early hip hop. And then this is more recent. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Also a performance. The previous one was with a photographer, Golda H. Hall, and this one was photographed by Andre Leon Gray, who's a self-taught artist in North Carolina, in Raleigh, who recently just got a Joe Mitchell. And so we were in the residency, and we were talking about collaborating somehow. So he threw up these stickers on the far right image here. And I ended up wearing them. But then I also photographed this from a museum, which is a quipu. Quipu is a way of data keeping in Andean cultures that predates the Inca culture, and something that's still encoded. And one could say this is also encoded, or has different origins. And that's something Andre and I were really interested in, about how imagery that could be in popular culture that has many beginnings, like hip hop has many beginnings. One could say Herman Melville's Moby Dick has many beginnings, depending on if Toni Morrison's interpretation or Cornell West's interpretation of it, or my interpretation of it. So we were having a conversation about that, and we decided to make these three photos. Threes because three is an odd number, suggesting infinity or continuation. And this is just to show that I have some drawing skills. Threes. Took them out of the first, the second, and the third. Yeah. Let's see. The size of this piece is about the size of the image that you see. This too. This is about the scale. These are entitled Rumi Makis. Rumi Makis in Quechua means fist of stone or hand of stone. And it's Andean martial art, similar to Asian martial arts. It's also over 1,000 years old, and went underground during colonial period in Peru and in South America, but it's still practiced, and it's, I should say, it resurfaced. And I was taught rumimaki when I was a child by my uncle, and there's many movements to it. And what I wanted to do with this series was reference cultural encoding in Mapuche and Andean cultures that relate to my family's background. But I'm certainly not going to paint a figure of a man doing some position. I approached it in a way where it's a lot more abstract, using specific color palette from the Andean flags, the huipalas. And so there's a movement here, but it's all abstracted. And I don't know if you noticed, but I also use reclaimed materials. Theater backdrop paper, which was used for the last drawings. These are paint chips from hardware stores, different hardware stores. I don't like to mention the hardware stores because they're not sponsoring us. So they're free at the hardware store. I did have to buy the glue, and I buy wood glue, because when it dries, it has this brownish tone, similar to skin tone. So I wanted to complement the skin tone, and so that's what I did. And they're mounted on just cardboard that you find in a hardware store's gardening section. I like the gardening section a lot. And they have pallets where they have cinder blocks and stuff. When the cinder blocks are all purchased, this very specific cardboard with wax on one side is usually left there. So I just take them and roll them up, and they wave goodbye to me, and then I take them and glue them together. So there's many rumimaki positions, and this is one of many. This is another one, but this one is, I think, 12 by 22 feet. All paint chips with also a feather and shoelaces, resembling quipus. And then this is a cajon, an Afro-Peruvian drum. It looks like a speaker. I used to think they were speakers when I was a kid in the U.S., but they're not. And some smaller works here. More installation work, different scales. I tend to make more representational work smaller, so it makes people have more of an intimate relationship with the work, but then a lot more expansive work so they can have a certain distance. So just go back and forth a lot. For this project, I used a scaffolding that was already in the gallery space. This is a lot more recent. This is from 2023. And I made these drawings with chocolate, just raw chocolate, cacao. And I did them on regular filler paper. During my visit, I wanted to challenge myself and not take any materials with me. So I went to Peru and used what was there, which is filler paper, chocolate, and these little store-bought frames to hold them up with the clamps, scaffolding that the gallery has. We constructed this sculptural element, which is somewhat replicating Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And we filled it up with chicha morada. I don't know how to say that in English. It's like purple Kool-Aid. But it's very specific to Andean cultures. It's made with fermented purple corn, and it's used for sacred rituals. It's really, really easy for me to write about my work, but it's like pulling teeth for me to talk about it in public, because to me it's boring. It's not boring. It's just, I've been there. Yeah. So I always find a different way of speaking about it, or try to at least, and try to share that, at least the magic that made it. I know some of you are interested in the arts, and what's going to happen tomorrow. Will you pursue it in grad school? Will there be grad school? Will you go into sciences, medicine, law? It doesn't matter what you do, where you go, as long as you use creativity, apply creativity to it, you're always going to excel. Creativity is not synonymous with visual arts. We use it for anything and everything. But we're often taught that creativity has to do with something visual. Not at all. Not at all. I still get a high doing this work or writing about my own work. But I always go back to collaborations. This is with Jaune Reyes, a Filipino-American artist from the West Coast, San Francisco, who actually did a residency here. Yeah. I didn't know that. He never told me. We did this collaboration in 2014 in the New Orleans area, in the St. Malo parish, where Filipino men lived there in 1763, or as early as. They jumped a ship, a Spanish ship. And we were both interested in this story, and so we went there. We filmed it with a 60mm movie camera, and here's a projection of it. You see on the left here, there's a record, vinyl record set, a player, and we made a limited edition of 4 vinyl records. Because when you think of vinyl records, you think of millions of copies. We wanted to make it more precious. What precious? The history of that. So we interviewed a scholar, a Filipino scholar in the community, and the other side of it is we recorded the presence of the Manila men in St. Malo. We recorded the energy. We did a field recording. And that's what's in these vinyl records on both sides. And it was a way of creating a piece where we don't also exploit the visuals. You can't exploit, the sound of water. You can use it to go to sleep with. Or you can use the audio to learn some historical facts about the contributions that Filipinos made in the shrimp industry in Louisiana. Even the covers are just photocopies that we transferred with nail polish remover. So each vinyl is completely unique. This projection. This was done for, we did it for ourselves, and then we were invited to do it for Prospect 3 Triennial in New Orleans. And the film is just a static image, well, static camera position with whatever was happening. And a boat, actually, a fishing boat actually passed by. So that was nice. I kept doing more vinyl record projects in Philadelphia. Theaster Gates made a project a year after I did mine, and he called it Young Lords. And this was actually in 2022, 2021. I'm not saying anything about Theaster, but it was focused on the Young Lords Party in Philadelphia and the Black Panther Party in Philadelphia, documenting the history of where the chapters were located, the actual addresses. So I went there. Of course, they're not there anymore. Neither are the buildings. But I documented the space, the audio, and used local newspaper articles to reconstruct their narratives, their contributions that those chapters made. I focused on both the party and the Lords, reducing it down to geometric shapes and headlines from their newspapers also. Mainstream and their own newspapers, Palante newspaper and the Panther newspaper. And also dates. Dates are very important. The dates will lead you to finding out more information about it. So it's kind of an abstract index. And this is a poster that came with the vinyl record. Created these listening booths. You see record player at the end. You can go in each one of these, and it'll give you a private session. Another Rumimaki. This is a lot bigger. It's a 10 by 25, 10 by 30, I think. You get an idea of the scale. This was done, again, working with ready-made materials. I always gravitated to ready-made materials or just anything I can get my hands on because I didn't have a lot of money in undergrad, in junior college. You get a list of things you need to buy. I couldn't afford any of that. So I just made it up as I went along. What we had available was cinder blocks. So we got cinder blocks, and I made a labyrinth in the space. Yeah. And that was one room, and the other room was the scaffolding. So I used a lot of construction materials. The idea of constructing something, a narrative, constructing a narrative. But I also placed some small books in some of the crevices. Books that influenced me as a child, which you saw early on. La Crónica Marciana, the Ray Bradbury's Spanish version of it. And then more concrete. This is titled Cumanana, which is a call and response that we use in Peru. This is in Havana Biennial 2019. Then I also wanted to show you briefly, I also curate. If you do so many residencies, you meet so many people, you network so much, it'd be a shame to cultivate all this and not use it. So I curate, and I focus a lot on artists who are underrepresented because of age, race, gender, color, sex. There's so many things. And so my goal is to collectively work and not exclude anyone. This is our last lecture that we did at Bridge Red Studios. I work with a collective called Bridge Red Studios and Under the Bridge. And so these are folks we work with. There's an Afro-Panamanian artist who's been working in Miami, never exhibited, Jaime Grant, and he works on cardboard, just a prolific artist. Miami also has a lack of housing and studios, so I created the MIA Studios. It's a Volkswagen Rialta. It's from 1996 that I purchased used with a grant from Ellie's, from Ulite Arts, and redid the entire inside, and now it looks like that. And when I purchased it, it looked like the other side. Artists, poets, writers, musicians can borrow it for a month or two so they can finish their work or start work, or just they need some private space to work, to be creative. It takes a lot to just focus, just to get it started. So it's really necessary. It's not an answer to everything. I would say it's more like a Band-Aid. And I try to do, and we try to do what we can. After that, after I created that, I worked with Rick Lowe in the Greenwood Centennial in 2021. And we created this. This is a photograph by Bev Grant, who's a New York-based photographer who was part of Newsreel in New York chapter in this late 60s, early 70s. And she lent us a lot of her photographs. We made this collage. And this is the Greenwood Art Project van, and we drove around Tulsa and parts of Oklahoma, inviting people to create their own interpretations, their own feelings of what happened in Tulsa in 1921. And then we placed the posters on the surface of both sides of the vehicle, and we would do talks. This is something I was interested in here at Colby. This photograph is in the collection, And when I saw this by Perkle Jones, I noticed that there was this one individual that I've been searching for years. This individual here. Right here. This is a different photograph by the same photographer, but this photograph is not in the collection here. It's by Perkle Jones too. It's a Filipino Panther in the Black Panther Party. And I've been looking for him in the Bay Area. Nobody can remember. And this is his photograph. He comes up in a lot of really well-known photographs, but nobody knows who he is. So I'm constantly searching for him and other members, Asian members, Native American members, Latino members. And that's part of a Creative Capital project that I've been working on, and I'll show you the documentary of that. It's very short.
William Cordova, born in Lima, Peru, is a U.S.-based cultural practitioner. Cordova's Creative Capital project, Stand Up Next to a Mountain, The Unknown History of Latino Black Panther Party Members, is a video documentation illuminating the unknown history of Latino members of the Black Panther Party between the years 1966 and 1982, whose public history and personal narratives remain completely unknown, but whose roles and contributions further add to the complexity of race, gender, ethnicity, and cultural paradigm. Cordova originally began his research on Latino, Asian, and Native American Panther members in 2005 when he was an artist in residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem. This project is unique in that it is the only document of Latino women and men who played a vital role as Black Panther Party members, struggling for human rights, equality, and power to the people.
Yo soy José René González, un miembro de la Pantera Negra, y entonces empezamos el partido en el estado de Connecticut, lo empezamos en el pueblo de New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Sure, yeah.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll grab a mic for you.
No questions, time to go.
I'm curious, you mentioned a few times about how writing about your work is something that you enjoy, and that comes maybe a little easier than talking about your work. Can you say a little more about writing and what that process is for you?
I think that started because my sister, Stella, would always put my brother and I to sleep in Peru, making up stories. She would repeat childhood stories, fairy tales and stuff. After a while, you'd run out. she was, at the time, she was probably 14 or 15. So she started making up her own on the spot, just improvising. And I would memorize all that, visualize all that. And we also had radio. So it was kind of, and my mom is a great storyteller. And I picked up on that. And early on in elementary school, I started writing. And I felt comfortable because it alleviated a lot of my anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety from violence that I saw in Peru, violence that I experienced in the U.S. and growing up in Miami. So writing was my first go-to. I was a terrible writer, but punctuation's terrible. But I wrote a lot, and it was always some kind of escape for me, coping tool. And then drawing. And I would make my own comic books, but then, like, what's his name, Robert Crumb, his brother, I would start out with text and image, and then eventually it became just text with very little image. And I just transitioned into writing a lot more. And I always kept journals. But I never wrote about art or my work until I had to in undergrad. And I found it easy to do. And I felt comfortable writing. The more I pursued arts, the more I had to write, the more prolific I got, the more I had to write. So one way of exercising for me was to go on Amazon and review LPs of music that most people would deny ever wanting to listen. Like, I did a review on the Monkees Live, 1968, but I wrote it as if it were some huge, like really important album. It was to me, and that's the most important part. So I wrote it that way, and I felt good about myself. So I exercised that way, just doing a lot of reviews of very not so well-known films. Or films that were there but didn't get great reviews because somebody didn't see it and somebody dismissed it or didn't understand it. So I would write about it. I was trying to rescue certain things that I thought were important. So I kept exercising that way. And then you go back to writing about your work, it's much easier to accomplish because of that. So the narration that you heard in both videos, I wrote those. It's much easier for me to write that than to speak. Yeah. So I developed it that way. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have any stories from your Skowhegan experience?
I do. I actually made a documentary of that too. I videotaped a lot of things that I've done collectively. My 2003 experience there was very special. I did it between the first and second year of grad school, and I spent 2 of the first weeks reading a John Lennon novel, not novel, but a book that was later taken off the shelf. I don't know, it was there. So I just kept rereading it. And then it freed me up to do a bunch of other things. Not the content of the book, just the ritual of rereading it. I went into a zone, and for those 9 weeks, I was completely focused on my practice and developing and just pushing and breaking barriers and purging a lot of ways that I had learned to work and just diving into things. When I went back to school for my second year, I just took risks with my work, constructive risks, healthy risks. It really liberated me from myself. And that experience convinced me to do residencies, to want to pursue residencies. I thought, this is my way, to free myself, to stay free. So that was my idea at the time, and it did that for me. Yeah. And the residencies also validated my practice, because it wasn't a commercial gallery where you can sell a pet rock in a commercial gallery, anything in a commercial gallery. but not everybody can get into a residency because it takes different types of ways of thinking, not just making products. It's actually thinking. So I go back and forth. I do work with a commercial gallery, but I needed to do that when I was ready. I didn't want to be branded early on, like a thoroughbred, and then take it out back of not producing enough red paintings. So I just took my time because I saw too many fall to that, that way of working. Too many really great artists in school or before I went to school go that route. And I didn't want to go that route. I wasn't going to go and sacrifice everything to end up like that. And so I try to talk sometimes to undergrads or grad students. Just let them know there's other options, there's other routes you can take that are healthy also. And one thing I always stress is to write and build community while you're still in school. It's really important to do that. Good question.
Hello. I was just wondering, because I noticed you said that you really liked having a lot of layers in your artwork, and so I was wondering if you could talk about how you decide all the details that you want to put into it and how you want them to interact with each other and how you want them to show up and say what you want them to say.
I think I had a struggle in junior college at Miami-Dade because I wanted to do many different things at the same time. And for some reason, I thought you have to pick one. Either be an artist, a painter, a filmmaker, sculptor, photographer. You can't blend them. And the more I saw examples, besides Rauschenberg, then I saw Jean-Michel Basquiat's work. And he wasn't, at the time, popular. This is in 1990. He wasn't popular. This is before his Whitney Museum retrospective. I think it was in '93. I saw his work, and I saw Haitian Creole, Spanish, Italian, English text written all in one space. Not necessarily the visuals, but the writing, which I was doing in writing already. I was writing in English and Spanish and sometimes incorporate Creole. Why Creole? Because half of South America wouldn't have been liberated without 400 Haitian militiamen who supported Simón Bolívar. So there's a lot we owe. And just also to acknowledge, sharing commonalities. That text made it okay for me to say, I'm okay. I was already layering things, but at the same time, I didn't know if it was okay to do that. I thought I was just being weird. Yeah. And so from that point on, I didn't hold back. Not everything works. The layering. Some of it looks really simple, but it's heavily layered. It also depends how I speak about it. Like the three Tupacs that you saw there, I could say, well, these are three representations of the same idea, different generations in geography, and then stop there. Or I could go deep into it in conversation and show you all these layers and layers. And there's other layers too. The economy of the materials. The paper is just backdrop paper you can get in garbage in a theater. It's all graphite, so it's also extremely fragile. It could be erased. It's not canvas, so it doesn't smell of money. It's paper. So you have all this fragility. Also the fragility of history, how people don't know about these things or do know, or just don't make the connections. Yeah. So I'm always thinking about that since I was a little kid, but I'm also on the spectrum. So I'm putting on a show now, but like I told Caitlin, once I get to the apartment, I'll probably shut down and hide in the corner. Yeah. So it takes a while, or it took me a while to be okay in working with what was coming natural to me. Those references that I made of the books, like Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles, it's also very layered. You know, it's talking about Native Americans too. Martin Adan's book, he abstracts and encodes how Jewish people, Muslims, Andeans, mestizos, Africans, Spanish people, all live in Lima, are all walking around each other by describing certain scents, describing certain designs, certain way people walk. It's very heavily layered. Yeah, that's the beauty of that. It's like gumbo. So, yeah, thank you for asking that. Yes.
So much of what makes hip hop revolutionary is that sample, that reference that a hip hop beat starts with, right? Like sometimes, you know, especially in the case of like Dr. Dre or something, it's like a soul song from the 60s or 70s that he takes that hook, takes that sample, and then turns it into something new. But there's always that reference to something that came before. Do you see that kind of thinking as a through line to a lot of your work?
Yeah, usually the scholars that influenced, like the scholarship of hip hop was always there. It was just in the street. It wasn't in the institutions of higher learning. It was in the other institutions. And the individuals or collectives that I was influenced by would be something like the Nation of Islam philosophies, or the Black Power movement, or Ernesto Che Guevara, and how he influenced the Black Panther Party, and how the Black Panther Party influenced a lot of hip-hop artists, like Public Enemy, NWA, Gangstar, Paris, Tribe Called Quest, although some of them you may not see it so directly. Like they were more influenced by, like Ramos Z of, what do you call it? Well, they were influenced by Nation of Islam or Islam itself, but 5%ers, and that gets into more of an abstract part of hip hop. There's also Sonia Sanchez, Audre Lorde. There's the Chang brother, what do you call it, films, Bruce Lee, early 70s and martial arts cinema. All of these things are influencing it. And you could see that. You could see it it's literally in the Wu-Tang. But it's not written about that way. Jeff Chang wrote about it in 2005. So that's a pivotal period in the early 2000s where, because he wrote it, and he was coming from an academic background, then it could be disseminated and embraced and talked about. But before that, we didn't have a chance. The only thing we had was Flybo and the Buttermilk by Greg Tate, which was a collection of essays and articles from the 80s and early 90s. And that was published, I believe, in 1993. Yeah, so it was those that motivated, I would say, the second wave, late 80s hip hop to, that's what really I gravitated to, and a lot of my peers gravitated to as a point of reference. The music and the velocity also, because early hip hop didn't have the same velocity as Public Enemy or NWA. It was a lot more slower. The only socially conscious material you could probably find at that time would be, it's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how to keep from going under. That quote, yeah, from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5. But besides that, there really wasn't anything else. Not until the mid to late 80s. After that, there was. And also growing up in Miami, I had a whole other type of hip hop there, which was Latino and English hip hop. where you have salsa being influenced, and you have freestyle being influenced into the music, and the booty-based music it was called. So you had Afro-Rican music, which is more conscious, but it didn't get national play, you know. Those are the things that we were drawing from, or at least I was. Not those folks in New York, because they just never heard that. They heard other things, yeah. And also hip-hop was influenced heavily by jazz, and especially the East Coast. So you had that component, that kind of intellect that was feeding that hip-hop music at the time. And we were accessing those things more so than the artists. So we may listen to Dre to distract ourselves, but we're really more attached to Snoop Dogg's philosophy. Not necessarily what he was saying in music, but his actual beliefs. So when you hear him talk about politics, he's extremely knowledgeable. While the music might be something completely different. Yeah. I think like if you hear, what's his name? I think it's Tom Schmidt, the guitarist leader for the group Boston. Guy's an intellect. You hear him talk about his music. He has all these points of references. Whereas you interview, I don't know, the lead singer of the Scorpions, you're not gonna get anything out of him, you know. Not to belittle him, but I didn't say David Lee Roth. I like David Lee Roth. But anyway, yeah. So those are points of references. See, I was saying that because the faculty could have accessed those things. Amiria Baraka did teach at Yale, but they just didn't go there because they didn't see that. They didn't see the main influence. Yeah, they just saw the music, but not what was shaping the music. Had they had Jeff Chang's book, then yeah, sky's the limit. But that's all changed now. After 09, 010, they started realizing all this was, the artists of color at Yale were actually achieving and creating something completely different, and they needed to embrace that. So they started hiring a lot more of the alumni, and things changed there, yeah. But this snippet was part of the first crew of that movement, yeah. Thank you for asking that, yeah.
Great. I think we'll wrap there and invite you all to continue the conversation in the reception in the museum lobby. Thank you again so much, William.
Thank you guys for your patience.